The police officer was trying to check the man's blood alcohol level, but the man's attitude seemed uncooperative. Suddenly, the ring on his thumb began to glow. His face was cold and expressionless. All of a sudden, he slammed the gas pedal and sped off. Even as the officer was clinging to the outside of the vehicle, the car kept going, dragging the officer along. The man didn't care and started using his elbow to strike the officer in the face repeatedly, trying to make him give up and let go. The officer couldn't withstand the elbow strikes and was forced to let go, falling onto the road. That officer was Yong-hoo's father. Yong-hoo was a well-behaved child. Since his mother had passed away early, it had only been him and his father at home. The two of them had always been happy and got along well. Yong-hoo's father was a wonderful dad who had devoted all his love to taking care of his son. He wanted to give him a life full of love and happiness. Every week, his father took Yong-hoo to church. He also taught him faith in God, hoping that this faith would help his son overcome all the hardships in life. He was also a dedicated traffic police officer. Due to the nature of his job, he often had to be out at night, so Yong-hoo frequently stayed home alone. The police officer was taken to the hospital right after the incident. When they received the news, Yong-hoo and his grandmother immediately rushed to the hospital to find him. Yong-hoo stood outside the room and saw his father, badly injured and lying in critical condition, with his grandmother crying uncontrollably beside him. Yong-hoo felt deeply heartbroken. At that moment, he desperately wished for a miracle that could save his father's life. Since Yong-hoo had always gone to church diligently with his father, and had been taught that sincere prayer would be answered by God, he ran through the night to reach the church, hoping that if he prayed with all his heart, God would help his father wake up. As Yong-hoo was sitting with his hands clasped in prayer, a pastor came and sat next to him. The pastor said that if he prayed sincerely to God, his prayer would be answered, and his father would soon wake up. Yong-hoo fully believed in that. He prayed with all his heart for his father, but unfortunately, because the injuries were too severe, the police officer passed away that very night. At dawn, while Yong-hoo was sleeping, his father came to wake him. He knew that life without him would be difficult and full of hardship for his son, so he gave Yong-hoo many words of advice and encouragement. In the end, father and son touched hands to say goodbye. Suddenly, their hands began to glow, and then the father disappeared. Yong-hoo seemed to realize that it was the last time he would see his father's soul. He burst into tears. The funeral for Yong-hoo's father was held the very next day. The same pastor who had sat with him the night before also came to pay his respects. When Yong-hoo saw the pastor, he suddenly became angry. He ran over, grabbed the crucifix from the altar, and threw it at the pastor's face. Yong-hoo cried and shouted. He had sincerely prayed to God, hoping his father would wake up. The pastor himself had said that if Yong-hoo prayed with all his heart, God would answer that prayer. But why did his father still die? Why didn't God respond to his prayer? Yong-hoo was in unbearable pain. All he could do was cry out and weep. 20 years passed. The Yong-hoo of that day had grown into a more mature man. From a boy who only knew how to cry, he had now become a professional boxer. Today was the day of a major match for Yong-hoo. His opponent was an American fighter, while Yong-hoo was known as the Grim Reaper because he had never lost a single fight. Holding this undefeated position proved that he had put in an immense amount of effort and training. It wasn't easy for Yong-hoo to achieve the success he had today. As soon as the match began, he noticed a tattoo of Christ on his opponent's body. It made Yong-hoo's mind go blank. His eyes turned red, and in his head echoed a voice telling him to avenge his father. But very quickly, he regained his composure. The two had just started the match, but Yong-hoo quickly found an opening in his opponent's defense. He delivered a powerful punch straight to the American fighter's face, knocking him down onto the ring floor. Yong-hoo immediately overwhelmed his opponent, rushing in and landing a series of punches. If the referee hadn't intervened, the American fighter could have been in serious danger right there in the ring. After the victory, Yong-hoo went to rest. In his dream, he saw his father. His father led him to his own grave. On the coffin was a photo of him and a crucifix. Yong-hoo, angry, ran over, grabbed the crucifix, and threw it away. But strangely, the crucifix stuck to his hand. Yong-hoo couldn't throw it away. Suddenly, the crucifix in his hand caught fire. A strange flame burned intensely on Yong-hoo's hand, and at the same time, a black smoke drifted out from within his body. Then Yong-hoo woke up with a start. He thought it was just a dream, but his hand still bore the burn marks from the dream. The next day, Yong-hoo immediately went to get it checked. He had to examine the wound on his palm. From that moment, strange things began to happen one after another. While Yong-hoo was sleeping deeply, a terrifying shadow seemed to try to swallow him whole. It made him struggle to breathe. Suddenly, blood started flowing heavily from the wound on his palm. Because of this, Yong-hoo had to go back to the hospital the next day to check the injury again. This kept happening more and more frequently, greatly affecting his training. Yong-hoo's assistant advised him to meet his niece. She had experienced the same thing as Yong-hoo before. When she went to the hospital, the doctors couldn't find the cause cause, so her family had to turn to a shaman for help. At first, Young-hoo didn't believe in those things, ghosts or spirits, because he had abandoned his faith on the day his father died. But the strange occurrences kept happening more and more, and they were becoming increasingly severe. So Young-hoo agreed to go meet the assistant's niece. When Young-hoo arrived, he found the girl sitting in the middle of the room. The room was covered with talismans all over the walls. Even though the girl was blind, she could still see many spirits clinging to Young-hoo. Though he didn't believe in such things, what the girl said made a lot of sense, because he had constantly been hearing strange voices whispering in his ears. The girl said that the cause of all this was because Young-hoo's heart was clouded with darkness. So many wandering souls were trying to latch onto him. She also knew that Young-hoo was carrying a ring that held a strong positive energy. After hearing that, Young-hoo was quite surprised indeed. That ring was a keepsake his father had left behind after passing away. After learning about Young-hoo's wound, the girl grabbed a handful of rice and scattered it on the table. Then she took a ritual staff and shook it strongly. The rice grains on the table slowly shifted to form the shape of a cross. The girl said that in front of Young-hoo's house, she saw a very large cross. If he went to that cross, someone there would be able to help him. When Young-hoo arrived at the place the girl had mentioned, a flock of crows suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They tried to attack him. Terrified, Young-hoo quickly hid inside his car to assess the situation. Inside the church, a young pastor was reading the Bible. Next to him was an older pastor who seemed to be his mentor. The two were performing an exorcism on a man who had been possessed by a demon. The man was tied to a chair. The two pastors continuously read scriptures and made the sign of the cross. The more they read, the more the tied man showed signs of distress. His eyes turned red and his muscles tensed up and bulged. Soon after, the man broke free from the restraints and escaped. He lunged at the older pastor and began to strangle him. In the moment of danger, the older pastor pressed his ring against the man's face. Luckily, he managed to escape, but the possessed man then turned his attention to the young pastor. He lunged forward and spat all his black blood onto the young pastor's face. Suddenly, the young pastor saw the demon's true form. Horrified, he ran away in panic. The possessed man then turned back, intending to kill the older pastor. Although the older pastor was being choked and close to death, he still held firmly to his faith. He continued to recite the scriptures and pray to God. At that moment, Young-hoo suddenly appeared. He arrived just in time to save the older pastor. Being an undefeated boxer, Young-hoo wasn't afraid of any opponent. Even if the enemy was a demon, he would not be overpowered. Young-hoo fought head-on with the possessed man without any fear. Even when the man jumped up, Young-hoo leapt and pulled him back down. When Young-hoo accidentally used his wounded hand to grab the man's face suddenly burned and caught fire. The older pastor took the opportunity to pour holy water onto the man's face. Together, the two of them successfully exorcised the demon from the man's body. Right after that, Young-hoo asked the pastor about the wound on his hand. The pastor told him it was the wound of Christ when he was nailed to the cross. He said it was a blessing, a rare grace that God had given to him. Hearing that, Young-hoo became extremely angry. He asked why God didn't save his father and instead gave him this cursed grace. For what reason? Then the voices of demons inside Young-hoo began to speak. They told him to kill the pastor. The pastor sensed something was wrong and immediately started reading the Bible. Miraculously, after the pastor began reading the scriptures, Young-hoo's headache stopped. It seemed the demons were afraid when someone read the Bible. The pastor offered to go to Young-hoo's house to check the situation. He went into the bedroom alone. Then the pastor read scriptures, made the sign of the cross, and placed a crucifix necklace behind the photo of Young-hoo and his father. After finishing, the pastor returned home. As soon as he stepped outside, he encountered the young pastor who had fled earlier, now waiting for him. The young man told the pastor that he was too terrified to continue this work and wanted to quit. The pastor took out a handkerchief embroidered with a cross and gave it to him, agreeing to let him resign. Elsewhere, a young man stepped out of a luxury car, dressed in flashy clothes that immediately marked him as wealthy. His name was Ji-shin, the owner of the bar, and the very man who had killed Young-hoo's father. He was meeting with a gangster to discuss business. The gangster threatened to send his men to shut down the bar if Ji-shin didn't pay the agreed-upon sum. After the meeting, Ji-shin secretly descended into the bar's hidden basement. There, he donned a sinister-looking robe. A heart lay on the table, and a demonic symbol hung neatly on a stand. He slit his own hand, letting his blood drip onto the heart, then began the ritual. Ji-shin pleaded with the devil, demanding the heart of his enemy. Immediately, the heart on the table started beating. Again, it had been linked to the gangster's heart all along. The moment Ji-shin stabbed the heart with a knife, the gangster collapsed in agony and died on the spot. Just like that, Ji-shin sacrificed the heart to the devil. He had received the demon's blessing. The strands of gray hair on Ji-shin's head gradually disappeared, and the wound on his hand healed on its own. It turned out this was the reason reason why. Even though 20 years had passed since he killed Yonghu's father, Jishin had not aged at all. On Yonghu's side, things were not improving. The pain continued to torment him every night. So, Yonghu went to see the old pastor again. The pastor gave Yonghu an object and told him that as long as he carried it with him, God would protect him. Yonghu showed disbelief. He told the pastor directly that he had abandoned his faith ever since the day his father died. But even so, Yonghu still took the object. After that, he drove the pastor to his workplace. The two of them talked along the way. Yonghu learned that the young pastor had withdrawn because he was too afraid. From now on, the old pastor had to fight alone. Yonghu watched the pastor walk into a house alone to perform an exorcism. It suddenly reminded him of his father, and so, Yonghu decided to use his fists to help the pastor in the exorcism. When they entered the house, the two of them encountered a woman who looked very panicked. The three of them walked to the front of a room. The pastor drew the shape of a cross on the door to prevent the demon from escaping. When they went inside, the two saw a girl sitting on the bed. She seemed very normal. She said that it was actually her mother who was not normal, that her mother was the one who caused her injuries, and even locked her in this room. The priest placed a cross on the girl's forehead. Indeed, nothing happened. Could it be that this girl was truly not possessed by a demon? But the priest didn't seem convinced, so he told Yonghu to jump on the bed and pin the girl down. The priest poured holy water into her mouth. As expected, the girl's body immediately reacted. She continuously vomited blood. Right after that, she used her supernatural power to choke the priest from a distance. He was thrown far away. Yonghu was also pushed up and pinned to the ceiling by her. Unexpectedly, the demon saw Yonghu's past. It began to speak of his painful memories. This drove Yonghu insane. He madly strangled the girl. Luckily, the priest intervened. After Yonghu calmed down, he placed his special hand on the girl's head. Instantly, his hand seemed to burn the demon inside her. Then the priest poured holy water on her to increase the strength. The two of them successfully exorcised the demon inside the poor girl. This immediately alerted Jishin, because the demon that Yonghu and the priest had just defeated was one of his subordinates. After talking, Yonghu learned that the priest's goal was to find Jishin because he specialized in collecting the souls and bodies of the deceased. Then he sacrificed them to demons in exchange for power and immortality, and only someone with an arm carrying the power of God, like Yonghu's, was capable of destroying him. The priest hoped that Yonghu wouldn't lose his faith because of anger. After that, the girl woke up. The priest asked her about Jishin's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, the girl's eyes suddenly started bleeding continuously. It turned out Jishin had already anticipated this, so he had held a sacrificial ritual with the purpose of killing the girl and covering up the secret. Fortunately, the priest quickly recited prayers and performed a ritual to counter Jishin's ceremony. He successfully saved the girl. After the battle, Yonghu invited the priest to his house for a meal. The two talked a lot about life and work. The priest thanked Yonghu for his help today. Without him, he wasn't sure if he could have succeeded in this exorcism ritual. In another place, a boy was beaten and locked in a warehouse by his friends. Jishin suddenly appeared there. He let a demon possess the boy. Immediately after that, Jishin sought a way to meet Yonghu. He told Yonghu that he also had a wound on his hand like him. Jishin even acted pitiful, warning Yonghu that the priest would take advantage of his power, causing the wound on his hand to worsen over time. Because the child was possessed by a demon, he had now become unruly and destructive. Outside, two nuns were praying and chanting. Upon receiving the news, the priest called Yonghu. He asked for Yonghu's help. The poor boy needed to undergo an exorcism ritual, but Yonghu had been shaken by Jishin, so he didn't dare to answer the call. Since the priest couldn't reach Yonghu, he had no choice but to go to the boy alone. Yonghu, on the other hand, went to meet with his manager to discuss the upcoming tournament in China. When the priest arrived at the location, he used his ring to press it against the boy's face. After a while, the boy fainted. A moment later, the demon inside the boy suddenly revived once more. Turned out that more than one demon had possessed the child. When the waitress brought Yonghu some water, he saw the cross necklace she was wearing. Suddenly, Yonghu felt worried for the priest, so he left the meeting midway and immediately went to find the priest. At that time, the priest was also struggling to exorcise each of the demons possessing the boy. The priest seemed to be starting to run out of strength. By the time they reached the third demon, the priest was completely defeated. He was struck back by the demon, which attacked and repeatedly beat him. Fortunately, a nun used a crucifix to protect him. However, the demon pretended to flee, then suddenly leapt down, pinning and strangling the nun. Once again, Yonghu arrived just in time to save everyone. He pressed the hand of God onto the demon's head, combined with holy water, and thus all the demons were destroyed. On the way back, Yonghu drove the priest and told him that he no longer felt discomfort when looking at the crucifix. Yonghu felt very differently about it now. That very night, Jishin performed another ritual. He summoned a hellhound bloodhound to tear the boy apart. After Jishin sacrificed the boy's soul to the demon, he received a fang. Upon hearing this, Yonghu and the priest immediately went to the morgue. The priest pulled the body bag closer. While he was praying for the boy, the morgue lights suddenly flickered continuously. Under the flickering light, Jishin was sitting and waiting for the two of them to arrive. Furious, Yonghu chased after him out of the room, leaving the priest alone with the boy's body. Suddenly, the body moved and screamed for help. The priest opened the body bag and saw the boy had come back to life, with a wound on his neck. The boy told the priest that he was in pain and terrified. He begged the priest to hold him. When the priest hugged the boy, Jishin suddenly appeared behind him. He used the newly obtained fang to stab the priest in the back. Yonghu, while chasing Jishin, suddenly stopped. Sensing that something was wrong, he immediately rushed back to the priest's location. When he arrived, he saw Jishin holding the fang against the priest's neck. Jishin forced him to give up his power by raising his hand and reciting a spell to renounce God and the Holy Spirit. If he did that, Yonghu would lose the power of God, and no one would be able to defeat Jishin anymore. But the priest would rather die than let him do that, so he used his strength to stab the fang into his own neck. After dealing with the priest, Jishin also vanished. Yonghu quickly ran over to support the priest and brought him to the timid young priest from earlier. The young priest poured holy water onto the cloth that the older priest had given him before, then placed it on the priest's wound. He continuously prayed and made the sign of the cross over him. Meanwhile, Yonghu went alone to the church and prayed, just like he had done 20 years ago. The only difference was that this time he begged God to save the priest, not to let him die like his father. In the end, a miracle happened. The priest slowly regained consciousness. When he gave his ring to Yonghu, Yonghu decided that this time he would act alone. He would go find Jishin and take revenge for the priest. Before he left, the timid young priest gave Yonghu an item. It was a priest's robe, the kind usually worn during exorcism rituals. The young priest said that the robe could enhance Yonghu's strength when fighting demons. It would help increase his chances of winning. Yonghu put on the robe and then rode his motorcycle to the house of the possessed girl, intending to question her about Jishin's location. After Yonghu got the address, he went alone to Jishin's bar. As soon as he arrived, he encountered several of Jishin's subordinates already waiting for him. Known as the undefeated fighter, Yonghu wasn't afraid of them. He charged in and took down each one of them. But strangely, they didn't seem to feel pain or fatigue. Every time Yonghu knocked them down, they got back up again. Yonghu seized the opportunity to step aside. He poured holy water onto his hand, then pressed it onto each of their heads. One by one, they fell, and this time, they didn't get back up. After Yonghu had dealt with all of them, a particularly intimidating man appeared. He deliberately tried to stall for time to keep Yonghu occupied, buying time for Jishin to complete the demonic summoning ritual. Yonghu struggled in the fight with this subordinate. It was clear that this time, he had truly met a tough opponent. But in the end, Yonghu used the hand of God to crush the subordinate's head, successfully defeating him. Meanwhile, Jishin had completed the ritual. He stabbed himself with fang. As Yonghu descended below, he only managed to see Jishin dive headfirst into the lake. Immediately after, Jishin resurfaced with a completely different appearance. It seemed that he had sacrificed his own body and successfully turned into a dark form. His appearance now truly resembled that of a demon. The two of them didn't need to say much. Jishin and Yonghu instantly launched into a fierce exchange of blows. This demon was so powerful that even Yonghu's hand of God could only cause minor burns. It wasn't strong enough to kill him. As a result, Yonghu was beaten badly. Suddenly, Jishin appeared behind Yonghu and bit into his shoulder. After being bitten, Yonghu collapsed to the floor. In his daze, he found himself in a very strange place. His father also appeared there. Seeing him, Yonghu ran over and hugged him. Then the two of them held hands, just like the last time his father left this world. It seemed his father had passed on a greater power to him. His hand ignited with a blue-white flame. With this new power, Yonghu was able to fight on equal footing with Jishin. The two continued exchanging blows non-stop. With his experience as a top-level boxing fighter, combined with the power just passed on by his father, Yonghu had no difficulty defeating the demon. After Jishin collapsed to the floor, Yonghu used the ring passed down by the priest. He cut his own hand to boost his strength. Yonghu decided to use his final move to end the battle. He gathered all his strength and struck Jishin with a powerful blow. Then, Yonghu pulled the fang out of Jishin's body and burned it. Immediately after, hundreds of hands emerged from the well, dragging Jishin's body down. In the end, he was sacrificed to his own ritual. With everything finished, Yonghu returned to the priest. He saw that the priest had recovered. Unable to hide his joy, Yonghu ran over and hugged him tightly. The scene looked just like a father and son. The movie The Divine Fury ended here. Thank you for watching, goodbye, and see you in the next video.